Welcome to Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, the podcast where ghost stories aren't just campfire tales, they're family tradition. I'm Heather Perrin, author, lover of haunted history, believer in the unexplained, and your host for this storytelling journey into eerie folklore, fictional frights, and true paranormal encounters from around the United States. Each week, I'll be sharing tales that are a little strange, a little spine-tingling, and maybe, just maybe, true. So grab a mason jar of sweet tea, pull up a chair, and settle in. Because here on Mammal's Front Porch, we believe the veil is just a little thinner when the sun goes down, and the stories, well, they have a way of finding you. If you drive about an hour north of Nashville, you'll come across a quiet farming community called Adams, Tennessee. On the surface, it looks like any small southern town. Wide open fields, rolling hills, and a scattering of old farmhouses that seem to have stood the test of time. But beneath that peaceful charm lies one of America's most chilling and well-documented hauntings. This is the story of the Bell Witch, a legend that has haunted the hills of Tennessee for well over 2 centuries. The Bell Witch haunting isn't just folklore whispered around a campfire. It's a story supported by dozens of first-hand accounts, documented in journals, family records, and local newspapers of the early 1800s. What makes it stand apart from other ghost stories is how public it became. Not just a haunting of one person, but of an entire family, and eventually an entire community. To understand how it began, we have to go back to 1804, when John Bell Sr. moved his family from North Carolina to the Red River settlement in northern Tennessee. He purchased a large tract of fertile land and built a simple but comfortable farmhouse where he and his wife Lucy raised their children. The Bells were known for their kindness, generosity, and success as farmers. For a while, life was good, quiet, productive, and unremarkable. But in 1817, something changed. It started with a small, strange occurrences. John Bell noticed an odd creature lurking in the fields, something between a dog and a rabbit. When he tried to shoot it, the thing vanished into thin air. Not long after, the family began hearing strange knocking on the walls of their log home. At first they thought it was animals or wind rattling the boards, but soon the noises grew louder. Pounding, scratching, even the sound of gnawing on bedposts. Every night the disturbances returned, and no amount of searching revealed a cause. Then came the voices. At first it was faint, whispers like the murmur of a woman talking just out of earshot. But over time those whispers turned into clear speech. The unseen presence began calling members of the Bell family by name. It sang hymns, quoted scripture, and sometimes mocked the family in a tone that felt half human and half sinister. As weeks turned into months, the entity focused its attention on the Bell's daughter, Betsy. She was around 12 or 13 years old when the attacks began. At night, she was pinched, slapped, and even pulled from her bed by invisible hands. Red welts would appear on her face and arms. Her cries for help echoed through the house, but no one could see what was hurting her. John Bell himself soon became a target. He experienced trembling, facial paralysis, and strange fits that doctors couldn't explain. The voice, which now spoke plainly, referred to him as Old Jack Bell and declared that it would kill him. By now, the entire community knew something was wrong at the Bell farm. Neighbors came to witness the phenomenon for themselves. What they found was beyond comprehension. The entity carried on conversations with visitors, answered questions, and even repeated prayers in other parts of the house. It claimed to be Kate Batts, a neighbor who, according to legend, believed John Bell had cheated her in a land deal years before. Kate Batts was still alive at the time, but the spirit insisted it was her vengeful manifestation. Kate's spirit come back to get her due. From that point on, the entity was called Kate, though most people simply called it the Bell Witch. The witch's behavior was erratic. At times she seemed almost kind. She would sing hymns, comfort Lucy Bell when she was sick, and recite passages from the Bible with perfect recall. But then, just as suddenly, her mood would turn cruel. She tormented Betsy relentlessly and taunted John Bell about his failing health. The haunting grew so famous that word spread far beyond the Red River settlement. And that's when a young man named Andrew Jackson, yes, that Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States, decided he had to see it for himself. Jackson was traveling through Tennessee with a group of men and soldiers and made a detour to the Bell Farm in 1819 after hearing locals talk about the witch that talks. According to the story, when Jackson's wagon approached the property, the wheels suddenly froze solid, as if held by an invisible force. The horses refused to move. Jackson reportedly exclaimed, "By the eternal, that must be the witch." The moment he said it, a high-pitched female voice laughed and told him she'd see him again that night. The wagon rolled forward once more. That evening, Jackson and his men stayed at the Bell home. One soldier boasted that he could defeat the witch with a silver bullet, was suddenly struck and thrown across the room by unseen hands. The spirit scolded him and others throughout the night, laughing at their fear. By morning, Jackson's group had enough. They left Adams immediately. Jackson allegedly said later that he'd rather fight the entire British Army than face the Bell Witch again. Meanwhile, the torment inside the Bell home only intensified. Betsy, now a young woman, became engaged to a local boy named Joshua Gardner. But every time they tried to meet, the witch's voice would intervene, shrieking, scolding, and even threatening harm if Betsy went through with the marriage. Eventually worn down and terrified, Betsy broke off the engagement. John Bell's health continued to decline. He suffered from mysterious choking fits and paralysis. On December 20th, 1820, he was found in his bed, unconscious. A strange bottle containing a dark liquid was discovered nearby. When the witch was asked about it, she gleefully claimed responsibility. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him," she said. John Bell died that day, and during his funeral, attendees heard the witch's laughter echoing through the cemetery. After John's death, the haunting gradually quieted. The witch announced she was leaving, but would return in 7 years. True to her word, she reportedly came back in 1828 to visit John Bell Jr. The two spoke for several weeks, and she supposedly predicted events that later came true, including the Civil War. Then, as suddenly as she'd appeared, she was gone. Today, the legend of the Bell Witch endures in Adams, Tennessee. The old Bell family farm no longer stands, but visitors can still tour the land and most famously the Bell Witch Cave, a small limestone cavern on the property that has become central to the story. Locals say the witch retreated there after John Bell's death, and many believe she still lingers in its dark, damp tunnels. Visitors to the cave often describe strange experiences: cold spots, voices, and unexplained touches. Some report hearing whispers or laughter echoing in the darkness, even when they're alone. Guides tell of rocks being thrown, equipment failing, and even the sound of footsteps following them through the cave. Several paranormal investigation groups have filmed there, including Ghost Adventures and Haunted Live, capturing unexplained EVP recordings and shadows that seem to move on their own. One of the eeriest parts of the Bell Witch legend is how consistent the reports have been over time. From 1817 through today, the descriptions rarely change. The voices, the laughter, the physical attacks, and the strange familiarity of the entity with scripture and prayer. Even skeptics admit there's something unusual about the sheer persistence of this story. Some historians suggest the haunting may have been rooted in social tension, land disputes, or even repressed trauma within the Bell family. Others believe the cave's geology, with underground water flow and mineral deposits, might create natural phenomena mistaken for supernatural events. But for believers, there's no question. The Bell Witch was, and perhaps still is, real. Local lore says that disturbing the cave or mocking the witch can bring bad luck. Visitors who've taken rocks or dirt as souvenirs often mail them back later, claiming streaks of misfortune followed them until they returned what they took. Even town residents who've grown up hearing the story their whole lives treat the legend with cautious respect. Whether it's ghostly or psychological, the Bell Witch remains one of the most famous spirits in American history. Over the years, the tale has inspired books, plays, and films, most famously The Blair Witch Project and An American Haunting, both said to draw elements from the Bell Witch's story. But despite Hollywood's attempts to recreate it, nothing compares to the original legend whispered along the Red River. The voice that came from nowhere, the laughter that echoed after death, and the presence that made even a future president turn and flee. Today, if you stand near the mouth of the Bell Witch Cave as the sun begins to sink behind the Tennessee hills, the world grows very still. The air cools, the light fades, and the wind carries the scent of river water and old earth. It's easy to imagine the Bell family's fear, the helplessness of hearing a voice you can't see but can't escape. Maybe it's just the imagination, or maybe, as so many have claimed for 200 years, the witch still waits there, in the dark, in the silence, ready to speak again. Now let's take a trip north to Louisville and visit the Conrad-Caldwell house. If you've ever walked through old Louisville, you know there's a feeling there you can't quite explain. Towering Victorian homes line tree-shaded streets, their carved stone facades and stained glass windows glowing softly at dusk. The neighborhood feels preserved in amber, beautiful, grand, and just a little eerie. And in the very heart of it stands one of the city's most magnificent and most haunted mansions. The Conrad-Caldwell House. Locals call it Conrad's Castle, and when you see it, the name makes perfect sense. Rising from the corner of St. James Court, the house looks like something lifted straight out of Europe. All turrets, gargoyles, and limestone arches. It's a masterpiece of Richardsonian Romanesque architecture, built in the late 19th century when Louisville's elite competed to outshine one another with their homes. But while its exterior screams wealth and success, the stories whispered within its walls tell of loss, lingering spirits, and a past that refuses to rest quietly. To understand the haunting, we need to start with the man who built it, Theophilus Conrad. Conrad was a German immigrant who arrived in Louisville in the mid-1800s. Like many who came to America during that time, he was searching for opportunity, and he found it. He built a fortune in the tanning business, producing leather goods that supplied both the booming horse industry and the demands of a rapidly modernizing society. By the 1890s, he was one of the wealthiest men in the city, and with wealth came the desire for legacy. In 1893, Conrad purchased a parcel of land on the newly designed St. James Court, a neighborhood envisioned as a haven for Louisville's upper class. He hired local architect Arthur Loomis to design his dream home, a showpiece that would stand as both a symbol of his success and a gift to his family. Loomis delivered exactly that. When the house was completed in 1895, it was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Built entirely of Bedford limestone, the mansion spanned more than 10,000 square feet. It featured carved floral details, intricate woodwork, and imported stained glass. Inside were lavish fireplaces, ornate chandeliers, and a grand staircase that spiraled toward the upper floors. Every inch was designed to impress, from the hand-carved gargoyles guarding the entrance to the mosaic tile floors that glittered beneath the gaslight. The Conrads moved in that same year: Theophilus, his wife Mary, and their 4 children. For a time the house was filled with music, laughter, and the bustling rhythm of late Victorian life. Parties were held in the grand parlor, and the family entertained Louisville's finest, but their joy would prove short-lived. Just 3 years after the mansion was completed, tragedy struck. Theophilus Conrad died suddenly in 1897 at the age of 62. His death was unexpected, and his family was devastated. Mary and the children continued to live in the house for several years, but without Theophilus, it was never quite the same. Eventually, the family sold the home to another of Louisville's prominent businessmen, William E. Caldwell. Like Conrad before him, Caldwell was a self-made man. He owned the Caldwell Tank Company, which manufactured industrial water towers and tanks, some of which still stand today. He moved into the mansion with his wife Lucy and their 6 children. The Caldwells, too, experienced moments of prosperity and sorrow within those walls. Over time, the house became woven into the fabric of both families' histories, a place of celebration, but also of loss. The early 20th century brought with it a shift in fortune for many of the great homes on St. James Court. The Great Depression, urban changes, and the rising cost of upkeep left many mansions vacant or repurposed. After the Caldwells, the house served various roles. At one point as a boarding house, later as a residence for the Presbyterian Church, and eventually by the mid-20th century it fell into disrepair. Yet through all of those years, people who lived or worked inside reported strange things. Objects moved without explanation, doors opened and closed on their own, footsteps echoed on empty staircases, and sometimes guests would feel as if someone unseen was standing just behind them, close enough to stir the air, but never close enough to see. When preservation efforts began in the 1970s to restore the mansion to its former glory, volunteers and contractors noticed the activity immediately. Tools would disappear and later reappear in odd places. Lights flickered in rooms without electricity. Workers swore they heard voices calling their names when no one else was around. Some left and even refused to return. Today, the house operates as a museum, the Conrad-Caldwell House Museum, and while it's admired for its stunning architecture, it's also become a destination for ghost hunters and curious tourists alike. Staff members and visitors have all had their share of eerie experiences. One of the most commonly seen apparitions is that of Theophilus Conrad himself. He's often described as a dignified gentleman in a dark suit, with a neatly trimmed beard and an expression of quiet pride. Witnesses say he tends to appear near the grand staircase, watching silently as if inspecting his beloved home. Some believe he's simply keeping an eye on things, making sure his castle remains well cared for. Others have seen the spirit of Mary Conrad, often associated with the scent of lavender perfume or the gentle rustle of skirts moving through an empty room. Guides sometimes report hearing her voice, soft, almost maternal, especially when children are present on tours, as if the house still echoes with the energy of her family life long past. Upstairs, where the bedrooms are furnished to reflect the 1890s, visitors frequently describe sudden chills or feelings of sadness that come and go without reason. On several occasions, museum staff have found children's toys, props used for display, mysteriously moved or rearranged overnight. A few claim they've heard laughter drifting down the hall, even when the building was locked and empty. But the basement may hold the strangest activity of all. During the home's years as a boarding house, the lower level was converted into living quarters and storage space. People who've spent time down there talk about hearing footsteps and whispering voices in the dark. Some have seen shadow figures darting across the walls or felt the distinct impression of being touched on the shoulder. Paranormal investigation teams who've recorded inside the basement have captured EVP responses, short bursts of audio containing faint voices. One recording, taken during a public ghost tour, seemed to capture a man's voice saying, "Get out." Another simply said, "Stay." What's interesting about the Conrad-Caldwell house is how the hauntings seem tied to warmth rather than malice. The spirits here, most believe, aren't trying to harm anyone. They're protectors, former residents who refuse to leave their home behind. Visitors often describe the energy as heavy but not frightening, like walking into a room full of memories that still cling to the walls. There are countless small stories passed along by docents over the years. One staff member recalled locking the doors one evening, turning off all the lights, and heading down the staircase, only to hear the distinct click of a light switch turning back on upstairs. When she returned to check, she found the master bedroom glowing softly, even though there was no bulb in the lamp. Another guide swore she saw the figure of a young boy near the landing, dressed in early 1900s clothing, who vanished the moment she blinked. Perhaps the most famous paranormal moment occurred during a local television investigation. The crew set up cameras in several rooms overnight. In the footage, a rocking chair in the parlor began to move back and forth entirely on its own. Slow, rhythmic, steady, as if someone invisible had settled in for a quiet evening by the fire. No breeze, no draft, no strings, just motion, calm and deliberate. When the clip aired, it cemented the mansion's reputation as one of Louisville's most haunted locations. Historians sometimes wonder if the house's very materials contribute to its ghostly energy. Limestone, especially dense Bedford limestone, is often said to hold energy, storing impressions of events or emotions like magnetic tape. Many haunted structures, from old prison to grand estates, share that same quality. Add in the constant cycle of grief and restoration, and perhaps it's no surprise that this house seems alive with echoes. Theophilus Conrad and William Caldwell were both men of determination, builders in every sense of the word. They poured their fortunes and their pride into this home, and maybe, in a way, that devotion left a permanent mark. To walk through the mansion today is to feel the contrast of time, the grandeur of the 1890s, and the quiet hum of presence that lingers long after the living are gone. Visitors touring the house often remark on an odd sensation near the staircase, the same spot where Theophilus is most often seen. The air grows cooler there, and the atmosphere seems charged, as though you're standing in the overlap between now and then. Guides say that if you speak aloud, especially words of thanks or admiration for the home, the temperature sometimes rises back to normal, as if the house itself is responding. And then there's the laughter, soft, distant, and unmistakably human. It drifts through the hallways late at night, blending the creak of the old floors and the sigh of settling timbers. Ask anyone who's worked there long enough, and they'll tell you the laughter almost sounds happy. Whatever remains within those walls doesn't seem angry. It seems at peace, content to remain part of the living history of old Louisville. Still, no one can quite explain why some visitors feel sudden dizziness or why photographs taken on the grand staircase occasionally show strange orbs and misty shapes. Skeptics point to dust, camera glare, or imagination. Believers say it's proof that the Conrads and the Caldwells are still present, watching from just beyond the veil. In the end, the Conrad-Caldwell house is more than a relic of the Gilded Age. It's a time capsule, layered with memory, the laughter of children, the footsteps of long-gone residents, the quiet devotion of those who've cared for it through their generations. All of it seems to linger in the air. When visitors step out onto St. James Court after a tour, the evening light filters through the canopy of trees, and for a moment, it's easy to imagine the 1890s come back to life. Horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, gas lamps flickering, and from behind one limestone window, the faint outline of a man in a dark suit watching, proud of the home he built and unwilling to ever leave it behind. Now, a few years ago, Andrew and I actually took a tour of the Conrad-Caldwell house. It is absolutely stunning. We didn't have any paranormal experiences, but the history tour was well worth it on its own. I would definitely love to go back for another tour at some point. I will add a couple of photos from our trip to the Patreon page. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the Conrad-Caldwell house reminds us that some places hold more than just history. They hold emotion, presence, and the imprint of the people who love them most. And in old Louisville, that energy still whispers through every creak of the floorboards and every sigh of the walls. A soft, timeless echo that says, "This house was once full of life, and in some ways, it still is." Next week, we're going to stick around Louisville and visit Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I hope you will join me. Until then, thank you for spending time on the porch with me. If you liked today's episode, be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and tell a friend who loves a good spooky story. You can also find me on Facebook at Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch for more updates, behind-the-scenes fun, and the occasional eerie extra. And if you'd like to support the podcast and get access to bonus content, sneak peeks, and more, come visit me over on Patreon. I'd love to have you join me on the front porch. All of these things will be linked in the show notes. This has been Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, and I'm your host, Heather. Keep your porch light on. You never know who or what might stop by.